Because you had to actually pull the cylinder wall. What?
So
You had to
basically,
sleeve the cylinders. That's what I was looking
Wait,
for.
is that what you were doing? You were sleeving cylinders? What's up, Brite Nation?
Hey, what's up, Brite Nation?
Okay, so now while Chris is working on the stepchild, wrapping up the Jeep to get it
Please.
ready for
Please
us
get
to
it
go
done,
off-roading.
Chris. Please.
So we have already driven all the way down to Las Vegas to Just Racing, which is actually a shop owned by a friend of ours.
There he is.
What's up?
So it's been almost a year since I broke the stepchild, and we've been waiting to get it back together. Well, it's already been a year as well for Brittany's Corvette that she blew. Well, you didn't blow it up. You didn't blow it up.
He just tried to blame that on me. That is absolutely not what happened.
So our other buddy True,
it wasn't
was
our
driving
buddy.
it.
Point is, we bought it used. The engine one was ready to
oil
go.
pump failure? Is that kind of what we found, sort of?
What we discovered.
I think the problem is when you have that much damage, it's hard to say what failed exactly.
But it was a lot of heat and a lot of messed up.
We don't know how the engine or the vehicle in general was treated prior to us buying it and what condition the engine was in beforehand. So we just took it straight to driftweed.
Yeah, and so I was asking around because I wanted it rebuilt. We bought an LS7 Corvette. We bought a Z06 because I wanted the LS7. And I was hoping it would be a simple rebuild, but as I asked around, and then he's like, hey, I have a machine shop. He's like, I can take care of that. And he's in Vegas, so he's only like 2 hours from us. So we brought him the motor, he tore into it, and we were hoping it was just going to be maybe pistons and rods and a little cleanup, but it turned out that it was everything. The head.
I mean, it's just a chain of events, right? Like when one thing goes, it could be bearing failure, it could be oil pump failure. You know, if these things fail while you're drifting, you're at red line, that kind of RPM, that metal starts to just go everywhere, right?
Yeah.
So it destroys the pump, every bearing's wiped out, cylinder walls are wiped out.
Even the hydraulic lifter buckets, right?
Yeah,
Even like
metal just gets everywhere, right? So
we thought it was going to be not simple, but we were hoping it was going to be simple, and it turned into a full engine.
He's like, you might want to hit up your guys at Texas Speed so Texas Speed sent us a whole rotating assembly. They do great stuff too, and they were going to either build us a motor, but Chris was like, no, I got this, and he almost kind of wanted the challenge of. Because you had to actually pull the cylinder wall, what?
So
you had to sleeve the cylinders. That's what I was looking for.
Is that what you were doing? You were sleeving cylinders?
This does have a fairly large bore, so the cylinders have some fair amount of girth to them. So that was definitely a solid depiction of it.
Accurate.
So Texas Speed got him a whole rotating assembly, and then there was some more stuff that you needed. And it just became, it almost would have been better just to have you build a full,
probably just start from scratch.
But the thing is we reused whatever we could, right?
Yeah.
So we had castings to work with basically to start that process, right? So you have excess scoring in the cylinders. Sleeves are inherently very weak on LS7s. So if we take too much material out, it's just going to fail again, right? So by putting ductile iron sleeves in it, considerably cheaper of a job to add the ductile iron sleeves and to spend $4,000 on a whole new LS7 block, right?
Yeah.
To get to that bore diameter, right?
Yeah.
So,
and now it's stronger, presumably. Everything's stronger,
Exactly.
right? So if I want to boost it or nitrous it or...
something along those lines, yeah. If you want to get a little bit crazier with it.
So we met Chris through drifting, but he's got Jeeps, he's got side-by-sides, he's got all this stuff, and he's also had a really bad time in the past with trusting shops to build motors for him, and you spend thousands of dollars and wait months, and then only to have something fail, which we have when we were in drifting. I've done it in the past when I used to drag race.
Yeah, finding reliable shops and reliable work, and it's not always easy.
So this guy decides, I'm going to buy my own shop area and buy
the equipment,
all the equipment to build my own stuff, and then now he just helps people out by hey, I need this 1J, 1.5J, 2J, although this is his motor, but if you need a V8 or a Hemi or a SR or on and on and on, no?
We do a lot of weird things. We try to avoid the oddities. And when I say oddities, oddities to the shop, right? Because I think the difference between us and what we wanted to bring to the table is, we really wanted to make everything perfect at Left. We really wanted to take the time to double check our work, have every gauge known to man, size everything perfectly.
You want to show them some of the machines that you got back there?
Every platform we touch, just it's crazy how just even from a tooling perspective, the intricate details to get things precise. I think that was the problem we had with the cylinder head, which was completely unrelated to the bottom end. Was you had bent valves on the intake, you had bent valves in the exhaust, and your guide clearances were way out of whack, right? So someone didn't have the right size reamer when they went in and they corrected the LS7 heads.
What's it called?
It's a reamer, right?
reamer.
So like when you cut.
This is just as good as
I'll
shop
I'll show you
content.
that. I'll show you the tools.
I want to show you some of the stuff because
Yeah.
I think it's really cool how much you have to do it right.
In the fact that this started as like just a personal thing because like he was tired of other people doing it wrong, to now it's sort of developed into a business.
Like an obsession business.
So I can start giving you a rundown of all the stuff in the shop. It is a little bit of a mess right now,
You're fine.
but I like keeping these pretty clean. But so we'll start with cleaning equipment. This is a soda blasting cabinet. So when we use abrasives to blast blocks, cylinder heads, things like that, we pretty much exclusively use baking soda. We have a media cabinet that has glass bead in it. It's very aggressive, and if that gets left behind in a passage, oil passage, anything like that, and we don't get it out, it could destroy a completely new motor, right? So
That would suck.
every abrasive we use is basically the sole abrasive we use is baking soda. That way, if something were to get left behind in a motor, it would just dissolve. Right?
Yeah, it's not a big
But
deal.
also when we put it in our wash tank or whatever,
That's this whole.
it will dissolve itself on its own. Ultrasonic cleaning, small, big, so entire blocks, cylinder heads, you name it, go inside this thing. So that way we can clean blind holes and agitate blind holes. So sludge and buildup and things like that. Metal particles can be trapped, in an event of a failure. Being able to agitate that and get those passages clean so they don't come back to haunt you later. Standard parts washer, burn-off oven. Rarely uses. This is older stuff, cast iron, rusty stuff. We could burn it off, but most of the stuff we use is pretty clean, like race engines and stuff.
What were you counting, Brittany?
The amount of machines we've already
We haven't
pointed
made it
out.
to the machine
I know
room.
we're not even in. That's what I'm saying. Like there's so much that goes into it, and it's easy to understand why some people get it wrong, but also like it
Or
sucks
cut corners,
when,
they don't
or
have
cut
the right
corners,
machinery.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
they're like, they should be good enough.
Like using that
tough.
the
So-
metal glass beads and
A
stuff.
lot of times we
instead
work with what we have, and we're going to get to the machine shop, right? And there's definitely levels to machine work, but also, you have to work with what you have, right? And when it comes to like a lot of older equipment, manual equipment that's less expensive, like it's not to say that guy couldn't do just as good of a job as me, right? You really have to be on it, right? And when you're just hiring operators to help, you can't oversee everything. And that's where things get lost, right? So,
But like if I blew up my 458, like you wouldn't really want me to bring that here. I mean, you probably could do it, but like, but because you haven't like specialized in it.
depends on what it is, yeah.
Yeah.
So like we have a dry ice freezer. So basically, for anything that's press fit, sleeves, things like that.
Cool it
There's
down,
like
let
also
it
things
shrink.
like there's like liquid nitrogen we could use too, but we prefer to use this because it gives the ability to warm the other side up to expand that. And oftentimes we work at things like ductile iron sleeves on an aluminum block. Aluminum expands at a much faster pace than ductile will shrink, right? So
It's actually really
for that
convenient.
application, we cool to 86 degrees Celsius, negative 86 degrees Celsius.
A
But,
little more colder than the Arctic Circle.
Cylinder head tear down. We have a 2-axis CNC valve seat cutting machine that's obviously not in production. I need to set that thing up. I've been too busy. How about your standard lathe, knee mill? For like we use this for like weight matching pistons.
I wouldn't call that standard. I mean, all my friends that have a lathe are like from like 1945. Like this, like.
So to be honest with you, like that's really smart because a lot of those older machines are just not built like that anymore.
Yeah,
they're just
That's why they buy them.
it's like
I don't
everything.
really do any big
yeah.
jobs on a lathe, so that's
Right.
why we have like this.
Off-roading we do a lot.
Yeah.
'Cause there's a lot of custom like little parts that you want to
And you could
make
have to
and
turn
adjust.
down pipe that's pretty large in diameter too. So crank polishing, vibratory polishing. I'm not a strong believer in like coatings. So like for like windage and stuff like that, race motors, we'll polish like cranks, polish rods, polish rotating parts, so that way oil doesn't stick to them, adhere to them as well, and helps with windage a little bit. There's, for the guy that's trying to make for like every horsepower counts.
Right, every little
Tenth of a
bit.
second counts, right?
Right.
Like we have stuff like this, rather than coating a crank for windage or whatever, right? So,
Gotcha.
Coatings can fail, polishing obviously can't flake off and fail.
So that's just like this area, and then you make it actually into the machine area, and you want to just like pan.
So this is where the magic happens, I guess. We can start with some of the basic equipment. So there's everything for like cap grinder here. This is our like micrometer cabinet. So there's just every type of mic you could think of for every bore diameter. I'm a mic nerd.
And this is because he has literally, you probably have like 40 vehicles, I bet.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, you have a lot.
This is one of those things where boys may grow up into men, but they never get over toys. Their toys just become more expensive And a little bit bigger.
But he's doing it. He did it the right way. I mean, he had the capital to be able to do this, and it turned like a hobby, obsession, everything into kind of so it is a business, but he doesn't work on people's stuff here, and it's not promoted. This is a simply you guys are going to get to know about it because we know him.
It's more word of mouth.
Yeah, and he likes to keep it that way. So if it's something that you need done, you can definitely hit him up.
Yeah.
Right? But like
I work on other people's I do machine work for other shops and stuff like that, and customers, right? And I build motors for other customers and stuff like that. Primarily, the majority of it is like the 2JZ platform, because a lot of people I know drift and things like that. And
LSs.
The reality is drifting is the most challenging thing you could put a motor through, right?
Oh, yeah.
Nothing is more taxing on an engine than drifting, especially at like a professional level.
Maybe rally is pretty bad. No?
Because like the reality of it is you don't have the load, right? The amount of people don't realize the amount of grip those cars have.
Yeah, nowadays it's pretty
insane.
insane.
It's the load mixed with RPM. The stuff we build, I build motors for Pro 2 trucks, Pro 4 trucks, drag cars. I mean, you name it. There's nothing that can compare to the wear and tear that drifting.
Out of something than a drift car.
And the whole reason we wanted to show this is because it's really cool to meet people like this in the different
worlds.
Yeah, the different worlds that we're in between drifting and off-roading and
off-road racing
and everything. And it's really neat. And I just like to show you cool friends like this that we get to meet along the way. Yes, if you have something, you can hit them up. You can definitely hit them up.
Potentially benefit you as well.
It definitely could.
I think the big thing here is it is a business. It's not my main business. I had a shop before I had my other businesses, and obviously I found things that made me more money, right? And I'm circling back to it. But yeah, it's just
cars never make any money.
Racing loses you money, and I don't even want to know how much all this spent, but it's definitely more than
I don't want to add it up.
Right, but it's definitely more than we've ever made ever.
No,
it's
if we start running down just the equipment that we have here, obviously we went over the cap grinder. For main caps, this is a line hone. So this is for a line honing mains. This thing doesn't get used too much here. We have some other methods that I'll show you here in a second that we've worked on. Valve guide sizing, final sizing. So we talked about the guide sizing and reamers. We use a reamer to cut them straight, and then we do our final sizing inside here. We have a limit of 2/10 that we allow the guys to take out. So we have to have very specific reamers to cut beforehand. And then rod conditioning machines. They're pretty much set up for small end, primarily just because every single rod the small needs to be sized, and then wrist pins need to be fit properly. I think it's a big part of the balancing process, even having our tolerances very exact. When it comes to small end, big end, it's already sized by the manufacturer. So if we have big end issues, we typically send them back to the manufacturer and have them replace them, because we shouldn't be saving something that's already been sized properly. It's supposed to be out of the box.
For our LS, what break-in and like motor oil, do you have anything specific, or are you just kind of
We do sell Driven break-in oil.
Yeah.
Driven is formerly Joe Gibbs. From the technical data we've looked at, there's some of the best oils you could run.
So do that for break-in. We'll buy some from you. You have some here. We'll buy, and then drive it for a few hundred miles and change the oil, or what?
Usually we heat cycle. If you could break it on a dyno, it's better. Heat cycle, tuning, and then we just drain. We literally recommend you go straight to the dyno. Driving 500 miles, that kind of stuff. And I'll explain that in the honing process here in a second when we get over to that machine.
Okay. I was just curious because everybody's different, and this is his motor at this point. Yes, it's an LS7 block, but not really. And then it's all Texas Speed parts that you needed.
Well, if anything happens, it's Texas Speed's motor. So. Well, this is a block machining center, right? So it's just a 3-axis CNC mill. Right now we have it set up with our right angle cutter. So we use this to size mains, right? As opposed to using an align hone. This is actually a line boring tool. This is actually a tool we had developed for us with Rottler to do the mains of an inline block. So this is shrunk down, and there's a timing belt inside there as opposed to a gear-driven one. And we were able to shrink it down just barely enough to fit in between here and do an inline box. So this is actually the first of its kind because this was a really big issue with this platform. This is stuff we talked about with Aaron and stuff too.
The 2J.
The most common thing, that failure point that we saw with these engines was oil pump failures. And what we found is when you take a cast steel and you mix it with a billet steel, a mandrel has no memory. So it's always going to take the path of least resistance. So if we shrink the hole and then we open that back up to make it round again, what happens is that mandrel walks down into the block and then offsets the crank. And then the oil pump gears don't line up right. and then it generates heat, excess heat, they seize up. So we developed a tool so we could cut these exactly to 1/10 of a thou, all the way down, and actually cut them on these. And actually this tool exists in Rottler's catalog now.
Oh.
So there's actually other machine shops that do have this.
That's because, I mean, we're talking cars with big power and a lot of abuse.
Yeah.
And so this stuff matters when you're running 45 pounds of boost and a 200 shot of nitrous
especially
or something.
RPM and stuff like that, right? Like is a big killer. The big stuff you should be running dry sump anyways, but that's a $30,000 chunk of steel to be able to do one job that I get paid like $300 to do. So
that's
Welcome to car life.
yeah, that's car
definitely
life.
not the smartest business investment. So this is our cylinder hone. This one actually pressure senses as it cuts, so it'll actually straighten. We don't use that function too much. We try to give ourselves enough room to be able to blueprint and bore so that we're taking very little out. But this will actually straighten as it cuts. It runs coolant, diamond stones, and we have a variation of heads. So like right there's a 4-stone head, and then we have 6-stone heads. So if we're taking a lot of material, we use 6-stone heads for concentricity. If we're not taking a lot of material and we're doing finish work, then we'll use a 4-stone head. And so there's different heads for the job. Basically most cylinder hone
Is there?
But on this machine in particular, like especially like ductile irons, majority of sleeves, it's usually a 3-step process. So we have our roughing stones that we size with, right? And then we have, which is usually around 200 grit, 180 grit that we size with, take material with. And then we jump up to somewhere with 300 to 400 grit, and we go in and we plateau hone, and then we go in with 600 grit. And so what we do ultimately, in every block, we have, you have paperwork, comes with profilometer readings. Profilometer is a gauge that we use basically to send down in the board. It measures the quality of the surface finish. So the depth of the cut, the angle of the crosshatch, the surface finish, it's very, very specific. So we have very specific targets we have to meet.
He gave me a whole booklet and he was going over it. I'm just like, that's cool Mandarin.
The big thing is like we want to guarantee results, right?
Right.
And so like my thing is, and I hate to knock them because I love the old guys, right? But you go to some of these machine shops, there's always like an old guy there, and he can eyeball everything and tell you that it's good, right?
Of course.
And so that's where we differ, right? Is we lean on our manufacturers, we lean on our suppliers, we lean on the engineers, real engineers.
And then you'll know if you get stuff in that's not right.
Yeah.
Right? Like you'll know if you get
I
something
know
in.
that if I'm at a certain depth of cut, surface finish, crosshatch angle, everything, pistol wall clearance, everything, if I hit these numbers and I'm precise with them, that there's not going to be any issue, right?
Right.
And so this thing is really cool because it'll actually size things accurate to 1/10 of a thousand.
Right.
So which is pretty absurd, right? When we think about
better than any ichrometer
and so
out there.
we run our profilometer in there, and basically what we do is we create a surface finish that's when it's finished, that's around 50 RA, which is about what the requirement would be for like a metal head gasket to seal, which is like a mirror-like finish on the inside. So basically we do the break-in process, right? So there's like different ideas where like concepts where you could take and you could rough a block, the ring will actually seat in and will deglaze the wall and smooth it out, right?
Right.
But then you don't have any control over what the finish size is exactly, right? You're guessing, right? In this we use a 3-step process, which actually puts the crosshatch in, puts the depth that we need in there, and it comes back and finishes it and breaks it in for you.
Okay.
So on your
it's,
block,
it's like pre-broken in, pre-assembly.
so typically what we see is when you fire the motor up, you're going to have a little bit of air passing the rings, right? Because the rings need to seat. Usually about 10 minutes into a heat cycle, and we recommend people run about 3,000 RPM, 2,500 RPM if they don't have access to a dyno. They run about 2,500, 3,000 RPM just to make sure that we get a little bit leaner in the cylinder, and just run it there for about 30 minutes. And usually about 10 minutes in, you'll see it seal up, smoke will stop coming out the breathers, and then it's done. From there, you drive it as if you're gonna, if you're gonna drift the car, go drive the thing, right? Because the reality of it is at that point,
it's all,
if
everything's
it
been
fails,
hot and it's right. It's
because something went wrong, right? You're not gonna get premature wear, right? Those pistons, those rings are going to seat immediately.
We need to find somebody with a dyno.
10 to 15 minutes of heat cycling, and those rings are going to be seated. You're not going to have any issues from there.
Nice. I know it's a lot, but like that's the whole point of all this.
This is the same block machining center with just a 4th axis, right? So like on your block where you're at a 45-degree angle on each bank, we could rotate over and we could keep everything parallel. We could measure deck height. We could measure everything in just one shot. This is where we blueprint motors, everything, you name it, right? Sleeve, cut out for sleeves. pretty much do everything on this machine right here. Valve facing, this is where we do seats, guides, and then do our reaming of our guides. I can just show you some of the, just like how crazy some of this shit gets. Like just the sheer amount of reamers that we have to do a job. So basically, this is going to be a reamer right here. Everything comes undersized, everything that's bronze, like a bushings and things like that, guides, they come slightly undersized so that way you can fit them to the valve because every brand's going to be slightly different, right? The thing is like you order a reamer and it comes in 1 thou increments, right? So that means they have a variance or a tolerance for how this can cut. So there's some motors like a 2J where I have 5 reamers for one guide at $250 a pop, right? Because they're gonna cut differently, right? And I need to creep up within 2/10 of size because if I try to take more than 2/10, I'm going to make waves. The guide's no longer going to be perfectly straight, right? When someone comes in here and they say like, I want my motor rebuilt, right? Like, I know some people say like, I know rebuilt, it's not going to be as good as it was or whatever, but for the most part, people have the expectation when you say rebuilt, it's as good as it was when it was new, right? So we try to make sure we use those same practices that a manufacturer would use, cut things precisely, right? And try to not just meet their tolerances, but beat them, right? If we make things more precise, we make them more precise.
Right, and they're I mean, you're making more race motors too, so it almost is more precise. Where they're more
someone brings
broader
me a weird
range.
cylinder head, right, and it's a race motor, and I don't have a reamer for it, and I cycle through 5 of these to get them to cut within 2/10 of size, so that way I can get the guide clearances perfect.
It's so expensive to build expensive motors.
It might cost me $1,000 or more, $1,500 to build someone's cylinder head that I charge them $500 to do a valve job on, you know?
Yeah, people, and I know people would be like, then why the hell are you doing this? And honestly, like you said, he's kind of doing it for friends and for people.
The reality of it is like I have 5 reamers just for one size on a 2J, right? And that's a lot of money, right? But I've done countless 2JZ heads.
Right. Now,
so it's worth it, right? But if I do one, I lose money.
Right.
So I can do them. I try not to.
Yeah.
But we could do pretty much anything in here. Multi-angle valve jobs, whatever we need. This is basically plunge cut valves, whatever we need. Guides, size guides. We can pretty much do everything on this machine.
So much tooling. Just the tooling alone, not even just, I mean, all the machines, but you see all the tooling and all the drawers and all the,
I mean, some of these cabinets have more money in them than the machines cost.
Yeah, I don't even, like, to me, I know a little bit about motors. I'm more of a driver, and I know Chris knows about motors and stuff, but this is a whole... This is a whole different level where you see people on YouTube going, oh, I'm going to build my first motor at home, and they take apart the motor and they kind of place things places, and they get one of those little hones that they put on their drill, and they hone out the cylinder walls to cross hatch it. And like, I know about that little bit of stuff where this is a whole nother level.
I mean, like, oftentimes on like really basic stuff, like you can get away with things like that, and sometimes you don't, right? Sometimes it bites you. There's always that guy on the internet that like did some weird and it worked. And
they used a $150 turbo off of eBay, and they rebuilt it in a dusty room, and for some reason it's been running for 2.5 years.
The difference is here is I stand behind my work, right?
Yeah.
And if I have to stand behind my work, I have to guarantee it works, right? So customer wants to cut corners, save money. I have to turn those people away because then I can't. Then I put something out that I can't stand behind. Then I got to be like, oh, you're on your own. Yeah. And those things just don't leave here.
Well, I did. He'd ask me, what do you want? I'm like, just do whatever you want to do. And then from there, as it goes back together, I'll make sure we call them and bug them just to make sure everything's good. I even asked them, like, do you have a specific tuner that I can just take it to? So it's not the tuner and it's not the builder and it's not, because that happens. That happens too, right? You'll have one person build it, and then you take it to a tuner, and then the tuner maybe does something or overlooks something. Then they blame the builder, but then builder's blaming the tuner. It becomes a whole mess. It's generally nice to try to find people who work with other people. So we're gonna have to find a tuner that maybe we both know and trust. I don't know. I'll find a dyno here locally and see and get some reviews. Yeah, we definitely have to do that.
The last 2 pieces of equipment is just a cylinder head, just a surfacing machine. We could do blocks and heads in there, but it's just a lot faster to load and unload out of there. So something that's not particular that we're just cleaning up and making straight, we put in there. But like obviously, like if I want to set piston to deck height, like how far out the piston is going to protrude, I would put it on that machine because then I can measure and I can surface and tense and get everything precise to where I want it.
It's just so many machines, and then you have to figure out how to work all these machines.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
when you
very
bought
good.
all this, you didn't know how to work all of this, or did you in your past?
I think
know.
we had a good understanding of machine work, and especially my partner Justin, he had some experience as well.
'Cause that's
But
pretty important,
it
too.
doesn't translate. I think that like the big thing for us is like I said, we wanted to be machinists, and we want to understand that we're machinists, right? So we lean on engineers and things like that to tell us where things need to be, right? So a lot of stuff we're not really figuring out, right? I don't have like a formula in my head for every little thing, right? I lean on the manufacturers to tell me.
Right, you have
And,
those
like,
specs, but I mean, when you buy all this, or even to know what you
operating
need,
it is challenging.
and then operating it,
it's definitely challenging to figure out what exactly the equipment
But
is
now,
that you need.
but now he's
to
building
operate.
motors. He's building 1.5 J's and 2 J's that are spinning at 10,000 RPM with
We got
900
motors,
horsepower, 1,000
everything
horsepower.
FD. We got guys running Pro Spec, Pro Am, Pro 2, Pro 4. We got guys
Trophy trucks,
Yeah,
like-
everything you name it, man.
Which is pretty
That's
insane.
insane.
And all that stuff is super. Think about like the Baja 1000 in a trophy truck just pinned off the rev limiter, just bouncing all the way for like 20 hours or whatever it is they're doing it.
And then we have balancing, which is like the last piece of the puzzle, which is super important. That's another area where I see a lot of
Shortcut or not do.
basically like the standard. I feel like, and what's been put out there by even like the manufacturers, right? Like, and this isn't I don't know if maybe it is a knock on them, right? Like they present things in a way to protect themselves, right? So like, the rod manufacturers, they don't want to match weight things very closely because it's time consuming, right? And they also don't want to grind on the part. And if I grind on a rod, it voids the warranty, right? And they say like, oh, you can match weight things to 2 to 3 grams is like, and that's kind of like the standard in this industry, is you match weight rotating assemblies to 2 to 3 grams, right? And then you mix and match pistons, right? But if I take a crank like a 2JZ crank, let's just say, that gets balanced to 200 ounce inches or 0.2 grams, and I take a rotating assembly that's weight matched to 2 grams. Now the hanging weight that's off that crank is out by 2 grams. Is that crank still balanced to 0.2 grams? So that's some of the stuff we do like on your motor, right? Like on LSs, they're a little bit hard to get to 0.2. It's kind of unnecessary. LSs are balanced typically to 0.5 grams
Okay.
from the factory. So like on
Well,
yours,
that LS7 goes to like 7,200 too, which is
Yeah.
quite a pretty high for.
so on
for
an
a
LS
V8.
crank, we usually chase 0.3 grams.
Okay.
And then all your pistons and rods get weight matched to 0.2 grams, within 0.2 grams at the most.
Okay, so you're
And then
mostly 0.5.
Your wrist pins are accurate to the 10th, like right on the money on clearance between the rod and the piston, right? Because that's also rotational force. The bigger the clearance, the less resistance it's going to have, right? So all that affects balancing.
Gotcha.
Balancing is the most important thing, and it's one of the most overlooked things I feel like in building engines, right? A lot of people kind of get that kind of general automotive attitude towards it, like it's good enough or whatever, right? And everything needs to be precise, or it doesn't get done here.
That's
right?
why we brought the motor here.
Now, like we said, we originally met Chris and know Chris like from drifting, from like way back. And then we happened to get really big into the off-roading, and he was like, I have off-road vehicles, let's go off-roading together. And again, I know the off-road community is kind of like its own community, but the automotive community, like automotive enthusiasts, most of us are into, if it involves rad engines, we're into it. It's cool. So it doesn't matter whether it's a Jeep or a race car or a drift car or a side-by-side, a drag car. It's all kind of cool. It's all very interesting. And as you can see, as far as drifting goes, he has quite a few drift cars.
Obviously, these are some of my cars I have here. This was my Z06 that we did on Drift Week 4 and 5.
That's where we drifted with them, which
Yeah.
this thing is nasty. This thing sounds nasty.
This thing is, it's a little different now, so we actually tore the whole car down, upgraded, so RPM like stage 4 diff, stage 5 trans, new torque tube with carbon shaft.
Yeah, carbon shaft.
I did a 440 cubic inch LS7 this time,
Oh, so
ARE
big.
dry sump, shaft mount rockers. It's 12.5 to 1 compression with a big cam. So I was able to bring my dynamic compression down enough to be able to run on 91 octane if I have to between tracks. And then I use E85 or octane boosters or something to be able, so that way I could do drift week. So it's pretty much kind of like maximum effort, like for like an NA car on
So that's
drift
what
week.
we were kind of talking about wanting, like since we were building Brittany's, but we want to be able to run it on 91 without and beat the piss out of it. And also we want it very, very drivable. The bigger cam you go, the more the pain in the ass it kind of is. So yeah, so we did
This
that.
thing's
So
absurd.
this thing's really crazy, and then this is really cool.
Yeah,
So
this is just like
this is an S14 cage, 2JZ, I'm sure probably fully built.
2JZ built, dog box, quick change, but streetcar. It's got power windows. I don't know why. It's got like sound deadening and shit in it. It doesn't make any sense.
Oh,
And
yeah,
the thing's
I see.
loud as shit.
Is it?
But yeah, it's got like headlights, power mirrors, streetcar stuff, radiators in the front, but it's got like big 4,000 CFM fans. So we like custom.
Just no AC.
We custom, yeah, no AC. We like custom mounted circle track radiator, like moved it forward. Like the headlights are cut out, so the radiator could go forward.
If you ever want to sell this, let me know. I don't know that I actually spend the money, but I kind of think I kind of think I do.
I thought this was kind of cool. Like we like routed like the fuel cell into the factory gas door and the rollover vent into the factory gas cap, so that way you could just fill it up at a gas station like a normal person.
Yeah, with having a fuel cell and everything
Like,
else.
So it's kind of like a street
Surge
car
tank.
slash.
That's what I'm saying. If it had AC, I'd probably steal it from you right now. But it's actually really nice where we live.
Yeah.
I could actually probably drive it most of the year.
It's
to
got
be
everything
honest.
but AC. It's got turn signals, horn, like you name it. Like it just has everything.
That's where I'm at. I'm old enough now that I just want power windows and AC and heater and all that kind of stuff in my cars.
But race car.
But race car.
Hence the Jeep.
I think the next one we wanted to build. Well, I don't know. We'll see with the next one. I always get crazy ideas.
And then
I
your
wanted to do one
350Z.
with an LS, and I wanted to do a vintage like AC unit.
Yeah,
inside.
actually put it
So
in.
I actually had like AC and everything in my race car.
That's where I'm at.
And this was Drift Week 6, I believe. We rebuilt the Corvette. After we broke in the motor, it went into CAN bus failure, and we just were chasing down electric
It
revs.
couldn't start. It wouldn't start.
There was a bunch of bad connectors we're fixing, and like we just got tired of it and literally tore the car back apart, ripped the whole harness out, did a whole new chassis harness in this car, and then now we're trying to figure out how to make like the factory AC unit and stuff work again, so that way it still has air conditioning and
I saw the compressor on it. It's a crazy built motor. Yeah. So then he brought out the 350Z instead because he
This
couldn't get that
thing's-
one running.
a blast, man. It's just an
350Zs are so just good.
You could just,
just
leave
drive.
the floor.
Yeah.
You just drive and drive and drive and drive and drive.
There's
It gets a little warm. You park it for 30 seconds and then
Keep
you
going.
drive and drive and drive
I
and
got
drive.
this one and I got a matching one, identical parts. Another Nismo 350Z. Just in case one has a failure, I just pull out the next 350Z and keep driving.
That's how you do it. That's how you do it. That's just a lot of information. That's a lot of craziness and how just having some fun by yourself and wanting to get into something can lead down a rabbit hole.
This video is a lot. It was a lot of information, and I don't know if you guys will like it and how many of you will actually enjoy kind of learning what goes into building an engine, but
Like
cars-
properly, like
yeah,
really
yeah.
properly.
Cars are expensive, and it doesn't matter if it's a Jeep or a Corvette that you drift, or a drag car, or a side-by-side, or whatever it is.
Honestly, this is why like side-by-sides now are $50,000. Like the new Maverick R has a closed deck block with like studs that go through to hold everything together because it's running so much boost and it's such high compress. It's
The
crazy.
amount of technology that goes into these things are so what Kevin understood, what I understood, what Chris understood, and I'm sure there's people, it's wild. I don't know, the more you know. We just think this kind of stuff is really interesting. I love learning about it. We hope you guys do too,
Yeah.
but it's time to get this bad boy back home and in my Corvette so I can go drift it again. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Remember, you can find all your Lite Brite Nation merch and decals at litebritstudios.com. As always, we love you, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Wait for it. Wait for it. Audio. Yeah, of course I want you in it. Okay, you ready?